Welcome into the Solo Shot Sports Podcast. I'm your host, Dom Manna. Happy Solo Shot Saturday, everyone. Man, I had a fantastic Thanksgiving holiday with the family. I hope all of you out there had a fun and safe Thanksgiving holiday with your families. I know I ate way too much, and I'm sure a lot of you out there are feeling the exact same way. But after, cleansing myself on Black Friday, I'm feeling good here on Solo Shot Saturday. There's a lot to get into today as we continue to push towards the winter meetings, and there have already been some teams that have gotten to work before that. Very different than last offseason where a lot of the big fish were out there for a long time. Things are going really crazy, and Juan Soto is at the middle of that sweepstakes. There were some Thanksgiving Day reports that were proven to be false of some guys saying that Juan Soto is agreeing to a deal with the Boston Red Sox for 12 years, $50 million a year. That was debunked by Jeff Passan, who, he's the Adrian Wojnarowski. He's the Adam Schefter of MLB. I trust Passan over pretty much anybody. And if Passan says, hey, don't use your platform as a journalist to peddle these fake reports, Juan Soto hasn't signed anywhere. You can enjoy your Thanksgiving, that kind of thing. Even though he was going to my team, and that would have made me really excited, I realized that it probably wasn't a real report. And then when Passan made that post, I knew immediately that it was not a real report. But Juan Soto, I believe, will be making his decision during the winter meetings, which are next week. And I think that some people think that's crazy, that he's going to wait out and cause a bidding war and XYZ. I think he met with all these teams where no numbers were discussed, apparently, and now he has received 5 offers, potentially 6. I know there's a 6 team that was looking to potentially put an offer in. So 5 or 6 offers, and, Boris's camp might counter those offers during this week and leading up to the winter meetings and seeing if some teams will bid up from their initial offers. But I expect Juan Soto to be signed before Christmas, well before Christmas, and during the winter meetings and make that time of year a big splash again, where we see a bunch of big names sign during the winter meetings instead of it just being, a networking event where a bunch of people go to, have drinks and steak dinners. Juan Soto, there's a handful of teams in it. I know the Boston Red Sox. I would love him to come here, but I don't think they're the most likely team. I picked the Mets originally, just talking about, Steve Cohen's money and them being able to outbid everyone, but it might not just come down to money. So a team like Boston or Toronto that has, a lot of young players might be a little more appealing, and where he could be, the unquestioned number 1 player on the team. Versus going to, one of the New York teams where, Lindor and Judge are cemented as those number 1 guys, where, if he joins Philadelphia, he's in Bryce Harper's shadow yet again. So I think that there's a chance, if the money's close, that he goes to a Toronto or a Boston, but I expect, Steve Cohen, the New York Yankees, and Dave Dombrowski and the Phillies to have the 3 highest money offers. All in all. So it'll be interesting to see what Juan Soto signs for. But, those fake Thanksgiving Day reports, got me a little excited, but was quickly thrown water on that fire by Jeff Passan, a guy who I trust above most all. A team that's been extremely aggressive before the winter meetings, trying to improve their roster, is the Los Angeles Angels. And, the Angels are a team that has been disappointing. They had the best player of the 2000s, the best player of the 2010s, and the best player of the 2020s, all on their roster at one point, and were not able to make the playoffs with all 3 of them. Only 1 playoff appearance at all with those 3, with a combination of those 3. And it's been a real shame for those fans out there, because the Angels, they aren't a small market team. They're a mid-market team. They have money to spend. They've shown it in the past. Now they haven't shown that they know how to spend money on the right people. Albert Pujols, contract, as great as he is, and the numbers he put together as an Angel were solid, but they weren't what they paid him for. Josh Hamilton, CJ Wilson, Anthony Rendon, the list goes on and on. Justin Upton, they've paid big money to some guys that weren't really deserving of that big money. But what they've done this offseason so far is reminiscent of something that's very, very recent in our memory, of the Kansas City Royals 2024 offseason. they were adding just pieces to improve the floor of their team and to, take that next step with their young nucleus of players led by Bobby Witt Jr. And I'm not saying that guys like Travis d'Arnaud and Jorge Soler and the combination of those two guys joining a team that already has a good catcher in Logan O'Hoppe means that Mike Trout's not going to DH just yet. I mean, they'll probably move him to a corner outfield spot as opposed to playing center field every day, but it's going to be hard to DH him when you have two good hitting catchers and Jorge Soler, who, does not play defense at this point in his career. So the Angels improved their offense significantly with guys like that. And then Yusei Kikuchi is going to LA, just not the LA team I predicted. I thought he was going to be a great value addition for the Dodgers, a team that desperately needed a lefty in the rotation, and we'll get to the lefty they actually ended up getting in just a bit. But Yusei Kikuchi gets really solid money from the Angels, around what I thought he was going to get. Some people were shocked with the number that Kikuchi got at his age, but I think a guy that goes out there and, makes his starts and throws quality innings that might have just unlocked something during his half season with the Astros, where he took that next step that a lot of people have been waiting for him to make. There's value in that. And, some people are like, that's $20 million a year. Well, in this inflated baseball market, it probably is, especially with the inconsistencies of pitchers and the constant injuries and XYZ. A guy who can post, and John Smoltz has said this for years and made it famous. If you throw left-handed and have a pulse, you can get a job in the big leagues. So Yusei Kikuchi, not just having a pulse, but being a legitimate guy to give the ball to every 5 days, a guy who's going to put himself right at the top of this Angels rotation, a rotation that they just traded Griffin Canning from to get Jorge Soler, a rotation that in 2022, they drafted 20 pitchers and only 2 of them have seen major league service time. They needed some stability in that rotation to help raise their floor and give them a chance of being in the 80-something win club to try to get one of those wild card spots. And if Mike Trout can stay healthy and these additions on the offensive side and the pitching side, are what they can be, the Angels are putting themselves in a position to be one of those shocking wild card teams in 2025. And I absolutely love it. I think that this is steps in the right direction, but they need to add at least one more arm to stabilize that rotation, And I think that that'll be a perfect offseason for the Angels, is adding some power to their lineup, adding 2 solid pitchers to their rotation, and getting Mike Trout back healthy. That's an addition within itself. So I'm very excited for what the Angels are doing, and I'm glad to see teams out there that, had miserable seasons last year are still willing to go out into the market, improve their roster, and spend. I think that's one of the pros of this new playoff format, where more teams have the chance to make it, is teams on the margins, instead of just playing it safe and playing for draft picks, are willing to push some chips in. They're willing to spend some money. They're willing to make some trades and go for the dang thing. So kudos to the Angels. I think they're still one more pitcher away from a off season, but they're in the B's right now, and it's not even the winter meetings yet. But the piece of information that you all are probably clicking on this video to hear me talk about is 2-time Cy Young Award winner Blake Snell agreed to a 5-year, $182 million deal with the Los Angeles Dodgers. And there's a lot of people out there doing the Jesse meme from Breaking Bad. How can they keep getting away with this? Like, how? But the real thing that we should be doing is applauding the Dodgers, because they have built a culture at this point where not only players that have these awards and big time careers want to come play for them, but they're willing to play a part of this salary cap magic. And I've coined that back when this podcast used to also cover the NFL. The NFL has a hard salary cap. And if you look around the NFL, there are a ton of reworked deals, signing bonuses, different things to work around and stay under that salary cap to get punished less for going over said salary cap. And MLB has finally started to adapt some of that stuff. And a big part of it is deferred money. Now, deferred money can be very tricky for players because, especially in a sport where all the money is guaranteed, by deferring money, you are basically putting the money in the organization's hands to decide how to divvy that up to you down the road over time. The most famous of which obviously being Bobby Bonilla, with Bonilla Day getting over $1 million every year for the last 20 years from the Mets. But there's a ton of star players that are still getting paid deferred money from teams. Ken Griffey Jr. is still getting paid by the Reds. Manny Ramirez is still getting paid by the Red Sox. There's a ton of guys that have done this, usually towards the end of the deal when they're trying to save some money in the aggregate to push the money back. But getting the money deferred up front is huge in a league where there's kind of a soft salary cap, which is the luxury tax. But for Blake Snell, a guy who won 2 Cy Young Awards, signed extremely late last offseason, the market was not what he thought it would be, coming off a Cy Young Award. It's like, how much better of a season could you want for your client to have heading into his free agency than a Cy Young campaign? But he didn't sign till late. He was injured, slow to get started. But once he got started with the Giants, he showed the efficient Blake Snell that we have come to know and love and really appreciate to watch. And Blake Snell is such a perfect fit with the Dodgers. And it's not because he's a Cy Young Award winner and they're full of MVPs and Cy Young candidates. It's because the Dodgers are very likely moving to a 6-man rotation in 2025. They had so many pitching injuries last season, and they have so many guys that are on the roster or going to come back, Clayton Kershaw, that will benefit from a 6-man rotation. And a 6-man rotation, it isn't normal for those workhorse pitchers of yesteryear, and there's still a handful of those guys lying around, the Justin Verlanders, Max Scherzers, Lance Lynn's of the world. But for these new age pitchers that are, pitching 5-6 quality innings, that extra day of rest, once they get into a routine, it's not going to phase them at all. And Blake Snell is the master of 5-6 inning starts. He pitched for the first time into the 9th inning in 2024 and threw a no-hitter against the Reds. He is extremely efficient. K per 9 off the chart. He actually recently passed Blake Snell recently passed Chris Sale for the highest K per 9 percentage in Major League history, minimum 1,000 innings pitched. So that was a huge thing for him to hit, that milestone and, pass Chris Sale, who, we all know as a historic strikeout thrower. But a Dodgers rotation next year with Yamamoto, who was pitching on, 6 days rest multiple times this season already, going back to doing that will be good for him. Clayton Kershaw, when he signs back, getting that extra day of rest as an older player, I think is going to be really good for him and his quality of starts. Tyler Glasnow, a guy who is a glass cannon, quite literally in his name, and him pitching on a 6-day schedule, I think will be good for him. They have Tony Gonsolin and Dustin May, both coming off of injuries, who I think, phasing them back in a 6-man rotation will be beneficial for them as well. And Roki Sasaki is still very likely to sign with this Dodgers team, a 23-year-old flamethrower who is coming over from Japan, where they do 6- and 7-man rotations. So the Dodgers, a lot of teams years ago were trying to catch up to what the Atlanta Braves were doing by giving their young players contracts early before they overperformed and wanted these mega deals. And you've seen some other teams start to do that. I think the deferred money with the Dodgers is going to be a trend that you start to see some of these other big market teams start to do. We'll give you this big gaudy number, but a percentage of it has to be deferred so we can add more talent. And mark my words, in the next 2 to 4 years, there will be at least another 4 major league teams that are doing 6-man rotations, that are seeing the quality in doing that. And I think Major League Baseball, which they've talked about it for a while now, has considered going from 26-man rosters to 28, like they do, later on in the year anyway, just to give teams like more options, especially with, the way pitcher injuries are going. And that coinciding with a spurt of 6-man rotations, I think makes a lot of sense for baseball and the state of the current pitcher. We're not going to see rotations where 4 guys have 200 innings pitched, where guys are going into the 7th, 8th, 9th inning all the time. But what is great about the 6-man rotation and getting that extra day of rest is if they are cruising efficiently through the game, they might go later in the ball game than they typically would on 5 days rest. So there are pros to this. I think it is the future of baseball. I think the Dodgers and Andrew Friedman are extremely intelligent, both financially as well as, just efficiency and following the numbers. And I think that this 6-man rotation that years ago I saw as a, big risk. A lot of these guys that they brought in as pitchers, Shohei Ohtani coming off injury, all these guys, Clayton Kershaw being old, Yamamoto, throwing them in a 6-man rotation is going to make them that much more devastating for other teams. Because now when you sign a pitcher, you're hoping to get 25 starts out of them. When you used to, be like, I'm getting 33 starts out of this guy. So, if you're starting at 25 at the most, that's going to be, I think, the new mark for a season is like 20, 25 starts, quality over quantity. And that's the new age of pitching. And, it's going to affect the career numbers. It's going to affect Hall of Fame trajectories, but I think it's going to be good, especially with the pitch clock, the emphasis on movement, the emphasis on velocity, and keeping these pitchers on the field. Because we've seen the uptick in pitcher injuries the last couple of years. We've seen some of these teams that lose their star pitchers really take a hit on the team's success. And if teams move to a narrative where, they pitch 5 or 6 innings every 6th day instead of 5th day, spread it out, give them extra training and rest, we might see improved results. So I'm very excited for that. I know a lot of fans out there are crying about Blake Snell being a Dodger. How do they keep doing this? They're a super team XYZ. They're officially a super team now because they have a ring, but they're pushing for dynasty status. They want to win multiple rings in a short period of time to be considered a dynasty. And they are on their way to do that with signings like Blake Snell, a guy who, not only took deferred money, but took a historic $52 million signing bonus up front, which through more tax wizardry, him being a resident of Washington State, where there's no state income tax, he was able to, save over $7 million in taxes on that signing bonus of $52 million. So, he's still getting taxed, but not nearly what he would have if he was living in LA. So, the rich get richer in a lot of ways, but I just think the Dodgers for years have been a couple steps away from everyone else. They were shedding payroll and still being competitive. They were developing great players. They were trading for and signing big names, but they were lowering their payroll so they could make the plunge for Ohtani. And so his historic deferred contract was made that way to be able to get more stars there while he's there. Now, he already had Freddie Freeman and Mookie Betts, but he wanted the Dodgers to be able to go out and sign the Yamamotos and the Snells of the world for the rotation, go out there and be in the case for Juan Soto and these different bats and continue to get better and be more competitive year after year. Because Shohei Ohtani is not just going for greatest two-way player of all time status. He wants people to consider him the greatest player to ever play baseball. I know some people already do. And if he's able to go on this dynastic run, I don't care how many all-stars, Cy Youngs, and MVPs they add, winning World Series plural is hard to do. The Dodgers are in a great position, to continue to add with this deferred salary cap magic. I know a lot of other big market teams are going to start following suit as they did with the Braves signing their players early. And mark my words, 6-man rotations are not just going to be a Dodger thing. It's the future of Major League Baseball. Here at the Solo Shot Sports Podcast, we have to throw back down the third baseline to this day in baseball history. And there was a lot of awards and elections and signings and trades that happened on November 30th. But the moment that stuck out to me was that the Baseball Writers Association named Cubs outfielder Billy Williams the 1961 NL Rookie of the Year on this date in 1961. And Billy Williams, I feel like, gets extremely overshadowed in his career. He played almost his entire career for the Cubs, and he was playing with Ernie Banks, Mr. Cub, who was a 500 home run slugger, infectious smile, big name. Ron Santo came up at the same time Billy Williams did, and Ron Santo was a better defensive player and made more all-star teams than Billy Williams, only making 6. But Billy Williams was a fantastic player in his career. 63.6 career WAR, 2,711 career hits, 426 home runs, and was a 290 hitter. He led the league in games played, 6 different occasions. He had over 155 games played in the majority of his seasons as well. He didn't miss a lot of time. Consistently hit towards the top of the lineup, 590 plus at bats throughout his stretch of his career. He led the league in runs and hits in 1970. His 200 hit season was that season. Otherwise, he was, a really quality guy in the 180, 190s, 170s range. To compile that kind of number, he was a very steady 30 plus home run guy, and even towards the end was still a 20 home run guy to be able to compile over 400 career home runs. He drove in 1,475 runs in his career, and he walked only one less time in his career than he struck out. The 1,045 walks to 1,046 strikeouts for a guy who had 400 slug power, 290 batting average, putting the ball in play. His career slash line, 290 batting average, 361 on base, 492 slugging. He was a career 133 OPS plus, 33% better than the players in his day. And his season in 1972, where he won the batting title, hitting 333, he led the league in slugging at 606 as well, mashing 37 home runs and driving in 122 runs. His OPS was over 1,000. He had a 172 OPS plus, 348 total bases, and finished runner-up in the MVP voting that year. Just an amazing, amazing player that doesn't get appreciated because, he wasn't on winners. The Cubs, were during that long losing streak of not really doing well, despite having some stars. He joined the A's at the end of his career, right after their dynasty was over in the early 70s. And compiled such an amazing, amazing career worthy of his Hall of Fame election. But a guy who gets kind of swept under the rug, had a Rookie of the Year in a very stacked 61 NL Rookie of the Year, ballot with guys like Ron Santo and Juan Marichal as well, competing against him. So just a ton of studs back in that era of NL baseball. And I talked about it with my boy Veda Pinson, but the National League outfield back in that day in the 60s, Aaron, Mays, Clemente, Frank Robinson for half the decade. It was hard to make the all-star teams in the NL outfield back then and to really stand out as a player who, might be a tier or two below those guys, but is still 5-10 tiers above the league average player. And had an amazing Hall of Fame career. Billy Williams is still with us to this day. He's 86 years old, and wanted to shout out an overlooked Hall of Famer on this Small Business Saturday. We are moving towards the winter meetings. Like I said, I think Juan Soto will sign, and once Juan Soto is signed, I think that opens the floodgates for everyone else. I think this will be the busiest winter meetings we've had in terms of signings in many, many years. I expect a lot of signings to go down. I expect a couple big trades to go down, and I will be right here, same time, same channel, bringing you all the updates and my takes on these moves and signings and where I was right, where I was wrong, how these fits work, and what I think will happen heading towards the 2025 Major League Baseball season. I appreciate each and every one of you for watching, spending part of your Solo Shot Saturday with me. Those of you that watched this in the aggregate during your week, I appreciate you as well. Make sure to like the video, subscribe to the YouTube channel if you haven't already, and leave a review on the podcast. It helps me quite a bit to get out there to a bunch of other baseball fans that love the game as much as we do. And before I wrap things up out here, I just want to give a shout out to my amazing, loving grandmother, my Nani. Her birthday's today. God bless her, cornerstone of my family. and one of my biggest supporters. So love you, Non, and hope you guys enjoy the rest of this weekend with some more family time and enjoy another week, as we lead up to the winter meetings that I think are going to be fireworks, absolute fireworks. I'm Don Manna, and I'll catch you guys next week.